And next, there we go. I think we have two cases, but they involve the same parties, so I'm going to call them both together. So the first will be Falsing versus Schmaltz, 23-206, and the next is Schmaltz versus Falsing, which is 23-208. Okay, and you are?
Roy Falsing.
Okay. All right. And then I see Ms. Schmaltz, you're logged in on video.
Yep.
And, can you give me a sound check to make sure I can hear you okay?
Can you hear me good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, since each of you has petitioned against the other, I'm going to hear your cases at the same time, but I will decide them separately. In other words, each of you is a petitioner and has a separate responsibility to prove the merits of your petition. But since you're both here and these petitions will sort of involve the same circumstances, I think it makes more sense if we're just going to talk about all of it at once, so that you don't have to separate these two things in your mind and get confused and have stuff get missed. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll let Ms. Falsing, I'll let you go first, and then after you've presented your side of it, I'll hear from Ms. Schmaltz. And then if there's anything, that needs to be added, I'll give you each an opportunity to do that, just to make sure that we don't, miss anything. Okay, so the record will be open on both 23-206 and 23-208. All right, can I have you both raise your right hands, please? And do you both swear that the testimony you give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Falsing, go right ahead.
Okay. Maddie is dating my husband, and since beginning dating my husband, she has assisted him in breaking the protection order that I have against him. I have video of her scouting for him, pulling up, sitting and waiting until he can get to the entrance of the area for us to leave our storage. And then as soon as he begins pulling into the driveway, then she pulls down the driveway to where the barn is, and she waits there. I also have several people that after one of the incidents, she drove to my home, and 5 people saw her pull onto my street. As soon as she saw us, she turned her vehicle around and left. A lot of her stuff in her paperwork is also mixed in with the protection order that I have against my husband. She stated that in part of her petition that she could hear me screaming that I wanted my husband to get his stuff out of my bus. In all reality, I have copies of the text messages I sent to my husband in regards to said bus, and this is the only conversation we had in regards to that. And it's on text. It wasn't in person. It wasn't me screaming at her or at him with her present. Where she stated that she was at the barn. I have a picture of where the barn is in junction to where we were at, which was 2,000 feet away. So for her to say that she heard me screaming these things is completely false. I have it all in text message. There would be no point in going back over it again and saying to my husband, get your stuff out of my bus. And if it had been that violent and upsetting, I'm sure that my husband would not have said, please, you can come back and help me, because I was leaving this situation. This was before we had a protection order. I was leaving the situation, so there wasn't an argument. He said, please come back and help me. If that had been the case, if I had been standing there screaming at him, I'm sure he would not have invited me back to help in this situation, to get his stuff out of my bus and my stuff into my bus. Because at that time, he did then help me put my things into the bus. Maddie only knows what my husband is telling her, which quite a large lot of it is lies. And I have proof of that, which we will be handling later on in the court case on the 31st, I believe is when it is.
Is that that's the one involving your husband?
That's correct.
The other, yeah.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Maddie has on more than one occasion said that I had verbally assaulted her, when the reality of the situation was, I have pictures of when she said that she walked over and started taking pictures of me. And I had a gun on me. At that point, I had not gotten out of the vehicle, so she could not see if I had a gun or not. I do have a concealed carry permit. I got a concealed carry permit after my previous husband kicked in my teeth and assaulted me. Because I turned him in for molesting my two youngest daughters. And he then was tried in several different states for that situation. But he told one of the judges he was going to shoot me from a distance. The judge urged me to get a concealed carry permit, and if I felt threatened, and I did. And I've had a concealed carry permit. I believe it was 2017. Since 2017, I have never pulled my weapon on anyone, ever. My father taught us when we were children, learning, growing up on a farm and then growing up here in town. My father was military for 35 years. You never pull a weapon on a person unless you intend to use it, period. I taught my children the same thing, because a gun is not a toy and it's not a joke. And in my situation, my gun has been very prevalent in keeping me safe. My husband's parole officer asked me to remove the gun from my home because my husband's actions were erratic and he did not know what was going to happen. 2 days after the gun was removed from the home, my husband broke my thumb. So as you can see, it has kept me safe for 14 years until now. I have never attacked Maddie. My husband and I were having a disagreement at one point because he was lying to me in regards to a relationship with her, telling me and my entire family and everyone who would listen that we were working on our marriage, we were going to marriage counseling, we were going to find a new marriage counselor together, blah, blah, blah. And she has said that, and I was yelling at my husband, and she got involved, and I said, it's not your business. I did have my voice raised at that point, but I did not attack her. I did not say anything other than it was not her business, and it wasn't. My connection with my husband is not her business. If it had been my children saying something, it would have been the same exact response. It is not your business. As for her saying that she's afraid I would hurt her horses, Maddie and my family have known Maddie for ever since she started bringing her horses over to where our stuff is stored. Her mother was unable at one point to take her to where her horses were being kept. I believe it was her grandfather's home. And so I volunteered. I drove 2 hours from where I lived, so the horses would not be left without care. I drove from my house to her house, picked her up, and drove her to her grandfather's house, and then went back. That was the only time I have ever been to her residence when her mother invited me. I believe it was 2018 or 19. And since then, her mother has invited me to her residence. I have proof of that as well, if you need it. I had no ill will with Maddie until all of the ridiculous 18-year-old girl things started. Like when I pulled in my husband and I have things stored at the same place. She has her horses kept on the same property, not near where our stuff is kept. Her horse fence backs up to our stuff, but there's really no need for her to be near my things. Uh, uh, in junction with where my things are. I have that as well. She was over there with my husband taking, I believe, loading a in-bed camper that belongs to my husband and I because it is community property, not to her, just to us. And when I pulled in, they knew I was coming. He knew I was coming because my son drives 2 hours to get from where he lives down to where my things are, and my vehicle would not start. He was coming to help me to do that. We gave him a couple of days notice. I have text messages of letting him know. When I pulled in, Maddie crossed from where they were at, probably 300 feet maybe, and said to me, "You have nothing on me. There's nothing you can do to me." And she came up probably 8 feet from my vehicle, snapping pictures of me. I never got out of the vehicle. I never said anything to her other than, "Okay, if you want to be violent, okay." And I picked up the phone and called 911 because my husband was not making a point of leaving when he had a protection order on him at that time to leave. I have pictures of him being within just a few feet of me and not leaving. They did not leave in a timely manner. Like I said, I have no I had no ill will against her or ill feelings against her. Now I just want her to go away and leave me alone to live my life. I like I said, I do own weapons. She's never been in my home to know where my weapons are kept. She is going off what my husband told her about where my weapons are, which is all false. She has never seen if my weapon was loaded or unloaded, and she made a statement that it was. And as for my mental state, the only time that she has seen me, other than as you're seeing me now, is when I was yelling at my husband because I caught him in a bold-faced lie to me, and it made me very angry. And so I responded with yelling at my husband. I spoke to her mother in regards, she's included her mother in her petition. I spoke to her mother and I have the text messages from that if you need to see them. And I asked, "Why didn't you just say you didn't want to speak to me or you were afraid of me?" She said, "I never said that. I never thought you would ever hurt my horses. I never thought you would hurt Maddie. I did think there was a problem when you yelled at her. And I did, like I said, just yelled at her saying it was none of her business. And that was it. I have not yelled at her since. I have been very adult and tried to speak to her, explaining, my husband and I, at this time when I spoke to her, my husband's telling me we are going to work on our relationship. That was before the broken hand.
Yeah, Ms. Schmaltz, you want to put your microphone on mute for the moment?
Yeah, sorry about
I have never been physical with her in any aspect ever. I am not a physical person. In my entire life, I physically reacted to being angry twice. Other than, my kids doing things that kids do. Again, part of the stuff that Maddie is saying in her paperwork is tied to my husband's case. It has nothing to do with her at all. And I have never physically tried to have any kind of an altercation with her ever. I've never tried to scare her or anything close to that because, in my opinion, my commitment was with my husband. My husband was one lying to me, and Maddie was not even a thought on my scale until she became involved and rude. Then I just kept saying, leave me alone. This has nothing to do with you. This is my marriage. And no matter what, he is still my husband. She has no right to be involved in that. And she says here that I took a picture of her vehicle. She's right. I did take a picture of her vehicle. And I have paperwork here from the police department explaining why I took a picture of her vehicle. My husband has a set of keys to her vehicle. My husband has a protection order against him from me. The police officer involved asked me for pictures of every vehicle I saw him driving, and to let my neighbors and my friends know if they saw him in that vehicle to call the police. So I took a picture of her vehicle because I have a picture of the keys that he owns or he has in his possession that was for her vehicle, and the police report for the same instance.
I understand. I understand what you're telling me. I understand the basis of your request here.
Mhm.
So,
And again, like I said, I have quite a few pictures of her watching me, pulling into where I am, pulling into where my family and friends are, and waiting for my husband. The one time she waited for him to get in before she would leave. So,
well, let me hear from Ms. Schmaltz then. So Ms. Schmaltz, you can unmute your microphone and you can tell me your side of it in the sense of the things that Ms. Falsing is saying, justify her getting an order. You can also tell me the things that you think justify you getting an order. So
Okay.
go right ahead.
All right. So let me start with trying to remember March 30th on the 23rd. I met with Sean at the Evergreen Valley gas station, which is at that new roundabout where Bullen and all that meets, to discuss what had happened that morning, where I actually did hear her yell, "Get your shit out of my bus." And then a couple seconds later, she drives down the driveway in her truck and then leaves. Then I come, I could finish feeding the horses and everything like that. And as I'm feeding the horses, I start having a panic attack because I don't want to hear her name. I don't want to see her. I don't want to see any vehicles that she drives in. Honestly, I'm utmostly terrified of her. I'm utmostly terrified of her. Like, I can't, I'm I'm shaking right now. Like, I, and so that day I fed the horses. She came up the driveway, speeding up the driveway, then went back there. Then I heard her visibly, heard her say, "Get your shit out of my bus." Then a couple seconds later, she comes, driving back down the driveway, then pulls out of the driveway like nobody's business as I am dealing with having a panic attack, and Sean comes pulling up the driveway and gets me to calm down, everything like that, because I'm panicking. I can't calm myself down. And so I calm myself down. He leaves to go to work. I continue feeding the horses, and I then went to work that day. And so as I'm at work, finished my shift, everything like that, he texts me at 10:45, I believe. "Hey, I want to meet up so we can talk about what had happened earlier this morning and to make sure you're okay." And so that's what we did. We met at the gas station, which is like 5 minutes or so down the street from the barn. And we were sitting in our separate vehicles. At that time, I was driving the black Toyota Camry. And so we were sitting in our separate vehicles talking about the day. He was asking me if I was okay, everything like that. Then as we went to go leave, we saw her truck go out of the roundabout and start heading towards the barn. And so I was like, okay, it's time to leave. And so we start heading out, and I forgot to turn on my lights because in the Camry is automatic lights. And I had drove my mom's car the day before because my car was acting up. And so I turned on my lights. A couple seconds later, I see that she is coming after me. And so I start panicking. I start going into a blackout panic attack. I can't see where I'm driving. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm crying. I'm like, hysterically laughing, crying, like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I'm just driving. I'm just trying to get away from her. I'm terrified. I'm trying to like drive. And I drove down, I believe it was Johnson Road on Yelm Highway by the berry fields and everything. I drove down that, didn't realize it was a dead end. As she's following me and we get down to the dead end, I whip to the right, which there's a gravel area where you can turn around. I turned around. As I'm trying to turn around, she tries to get in front of me, but then she stops. And so I was able to get past her. And as I am going past her, she yells out, I hope it was all worth it. And I rolled up my window and continued to drive, because at this point I was just trying to get away from her because I was terrified. I genuinely was like terrified, crying, panicking, everything like that. And then once I got home, we called the police officers to let them know, give them a report and everything. And then the day that she is talking about, where I pulled up to the driveway and, went back down, I pulled up to the driveway to see if people were there, because I wanted to make sure, because we needed to go back there and get some tools out of his tool trailer, which was still there. And I was like, okay, Lori's back there. I'm just going to go feed the horses and then leave. Next thing you know, Sean pulls up. I didn't even know he was going to be pulling up. And I'm still in the barn feeding the horses, everything like that. And then I get done feeding the horses, which takes me about 10 to 15 minutes or so. And I leave because I'm like, I don't want to stay on the property. That's it. And then the day that she's talking about, where I got about 8 feet from her son's vehicle, I walked towards the Bobcat to take a picture of it to make sure that we put it there and everything, that everything was locked down. And then I turned around to my right and I said, smile, smile, taking a picture of you. I took 2 pictures of her. And then she said something, and that's when I yelled back at her with the things that she said. And so then we didn't leave because we still were taking tools out of the bed of the trailer to put it in the bed of, sorry, my bad, the bed of the truck to put it in the trailer to lock the trailer. And so that was that day. And then recently we and Sean went to Walmart and we're getting groceries and we're going to go get movies because we need groceries and stuff. And I noticed that I heard her voice just slightly, but I ignored it because maybe I was just, thinking. But then we continued to walk past the second dry produce aisle and she comes out and I stop in my tracks, yank Sean's arm, and we start walking out towards the pharmacy doors because we had walked in through the produce doors. So we start walking out, we go to leave. He then sees, their vehicles and everything, which I didn't see when we came into the parking lot at all. Otherwise, if I would have just left because I don't want to be anywhere near Lori. So, and I was never served with the hearing for her order. I was never served with any of that paperwork. That was towards me. So
Yeah, I put both of you on the same
on the
calendar
same.
since,
Okay.
yeah, since you had each come in, I don't remember exactly if it was a day or 2 apart, but I wanted to make sure that you were both here at the same time instead of having you come back
Yeah,
to court
I
twice.
just wanted to double check. And then I have the day where she came and also yelled at us before everything of this. Me and Sean were working on her truck and I was handing him tools. I was on the driver's side, he was on the passenger side getting the drive shaft out, or the bearing, something like that. It was underneath the truck though. And I was handing him sockets and wrenches and stuff like that on the driver's side. He was on the passenger side. She came up. I was sitting against the truck, not her truck, but the truck that he was driving at that moment, to give him space because he was getting frustrated. And next thing you know, she comes pulling up the driveway, comes out of her vehicle, starts yelling at a little bit, yelling at Sean towards it. And then she comes in, I'm sitting on the ground and she comes in my face and starts yelling at me. And at this point, she is strapped, which yes, she is legally allowed to carry, openly carry. But that is why I'm terrified of her. That is the main reason I'm terrified of her. When she walked right up to me, started yelling at me in my face, had her gun on her hip, everything, then left. See, I don't like guns, and guns terrify me. So seeing that gun on her hip along with the angry manner, it's not a good mix. It's not a good mix at all. So that is all I have to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Like I said, I'm considering your cases together, but they're being decided,
Yeah.
each on merits, so to speak. So, all right. I think I have a fairly decent, kind of more comprehensive idea of what's going on here. Obviously I read the materials that both of you submitted ahead of time as part of your petitions, but both of you been able to explain in greater detail and more context what's going on, what the actions were, what your responses were, how you feel about the other, and so forth. And those are all important pieces of information to have. So, I want you to know that I'm considering all of this, in the context of a legal framework, right? There's kind of two main things going on. One is burdens of proof. Okay, each of you as a petitioner has a burden of proving that you're entitled to the order that you want by a preponderance of the evidence. That means the greater weight of the evidence.
Right.
So you each kind of carry that burden for each of your petitions. That's a one. And then two is just the framework for what constitutes unlawful harassment under the law. All right. In other words, each of you would be responsible for proving that the elements, the individual components of harassment have occurred. Okay. And in both of your situations, both of your petitions, I'm concerned that neither of those things has happened. Okay. The proof is not significant. I don't find in either case that there is preponderance of the evidence that there is, for example, substantial emotional distress, which is the kind of substantial emotional distress that a reasonable person would have. Okay. Ms. Schmaltz, you told me that you were in these blind, dark panics, but whether that happened to you individually is also sort of has to be analyzed under whether that's something that a reasonable person would do. And I don't think it is. I don't find that anything that Ms. Falsing said or did constitutes harassment in the sense that it's not a pattern of conduct directed at you for an unlawful purpose, and it does not cause what a reasonable person would suffer as substantial emotional distress. Now, has she been angry? Maybe. Has she said unkind words? Sure. But these are things people are allowed to do. And, especially under the circumstances, you two have a, kind of a difficult circumstance here that's going to raise up emotions and so forth. But, as long as you behave peaceably towards each other, well, that's not a problem, even if nasty things are said. Now, I can understand why you wouldn't want to have each other in your lives. Sure, that makes sense to me. It's uncomfortable for sure. But, the law can't be used like that. Law doesn't allow me to just say, well, gosh, it sure would be a good idea if these two weren't around each other because, that's awkward, right? No, I can't do that. Okay, I have to apply the law. So similarly, Ms. Falsing, and maybe even to a greater degree, I know that Ms. Schmaltz's presence while you're trying to deal with sensitive subjects around the divorce with your husband and the protection order with your husband is not convenient. And I'm sure it does not help in terms of getting, resolutions to those legal issues. But at the same time, your husband has a relationship with her, and I know it's difficult and it's probably unpleasant. But on the other hand, I can't find that anything that Ms. Schmaltz has done or said rises to the level of harassment in the sense that a reasonable person would suffer substantial emotional distress as a result of it. And that's just based on what you've told me, what you wrote, everything that you've explained. I'm not discounting that this is difficult. And I certainly hope, and I'll say it like this, I hope it doesn't get any worse. I mean, I know it hasn't been easy, but if it maintains like this and nobody does anything illegal or makes any unlawful threats or takes any kind of violent action, well, that's good. Maybe there is no pleasant way that this gets resolved, but there certainly can be a peaceful way where nobody gets hurt. And that's what I hope happens. So that's a long way of saying, I guess, and that in each instance, I'm going to deny the petitions. Okay, I didn't grant the temporaries because I had concerns. I'm not going to grant the petitions either. But if circumstances change, if there's an escalation, I want you to both know that you're both free to come back to court if that happens. So, and I hope it doesn't. I mean, I hope you're able to conduct yourselves responsibly and peacefully, and there's no need for any further petitions.
I have a feeling that it will be over a lot quicker than we had anticipated before, so.
Okay.
I appreciate
All
your
right,
time.
well, that'll conclude the hearings for both of you. I'll get these orders ready, file them with the clerk, and you'll both get them by email.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
day.
All right, thank you.